to Rush Hour? Get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening, lovely people. Welcome to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. There's no air conditioning in this studio tonight, and one way or another, I suspect things might get quite warm as the hour plays out. Tonight on the programme, I'll be joined by a man who stood for London Mayor and who was the host of former YouTube channel London Real, Brian Rose. I'll also be joined by one of the founding members of the Channel 4 news team, journalist Michael Crick, to discuss whether YouTube should be given the power to remove channels from its platform. And finally, we'll hear about a study that's shown tobacco-style warning stickers are to be put on meat in an attempt to reduce consumption. We'll ask how that could affect farmers' livelihoods. All of that and plenty of chat with my panellist, author and commentator, Laura Dodsworth. But first, an update on the latest news from Ray Addison.
Thanks, Neil. Good afternoon, good evening. And we start with some breaking news. London's Charing Cross station has been forced to close due to a sit-in by hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters. British Transport Police say that they've responded with passengers able to exit the station only at this time. Comes after the Met Police arrested 3 people at a pro-Palestine protest in London. They were taken into custody at Piccadilly Circus. One person was seen displaying a placard that police believed could incite hatred. Another was arrested on suspicion of breaching public order, and the third for assaulting a police officer. Of course, we'll bring you more on the situation at Charing Cross as we get it. The Prime Minister says plans by some groups to protest during remembrance commemorations are provocative and disrespectful. In a statement, Rishi Sunak said the right to remember in peace and dignity must be protected. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer echoed those comments, saying he supports the police in whatever action is needed. Israel Defence Forces have released footage of the military blowing up tunnels in Gaza and clearing an area of explosive devices. It comes as UN officials warned there is no place that is safe in the Strip as the conflict continues. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls from the US Secretary of State for a humanitarian pause until all hostages taken by Hamas are freed. Following a meeting with Middle East foreign ministers in Jordan, Antony Blinken urged Israel to, quote, take every possible measure to prevent civilian casualties.
Protecting civilians will help prevent Hamas from further exploiting the situation. But most important, it's simply the right and moral thing to do. When I see a Palestinian boy or girl pulled from the wreckage of a building, it hits me in the gut, just as it hits everyone in the gut. And I see my own children in their faces.
112 UK nationals were on the list to leave Gaza through the Rafah crossing today. Earlier, Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf announced that his family has been able to leave through that crossing. Palestinian officials saying that more than 700 foreign nationals have crossed in the past 2 days, including dozens of critically injured people. Conservative MP Bob Stewart has told Chief Whip Simon Hart he wishes to surrender the Tory whip while he appeals against his recent conviction. The Beckenham MP was found guilty of a racially aggravated public order offence. He racially abused a man after he allegedly told him to go back to Bahrain outside the Foreign Office last December. The Chief Magistrate saying that Stewart will not be jailed. Suella Braverman wants to restrict the use of tents by homeless people in towns and cities, warning that British streets risk going the same way as some in the United States. Posting on X, the Home Secretary said many tents are occupied by people, quote, from abroad, living on the streets as a lifestyle choice, end quote. Reports say the crackdown would target tents that become a nuisance, such as those blocking shop doorways, and that charities which hand out camping equipment could face being fined. Russell Brand is being sued by a film extra who claims that she was sexually assaulted on a US movie set. His accuser says the actor was carrying a bottle of vodka and appeared intoxicated when he approached her on the set of Arthur back in 2010. The lawsuit has been filed in New York. It's the first accusation to be made against Brand in court. He's not yet responded to that suit. And an effigy of Sadiq Khan is going up in flames tonight as part of Bonfire Night celebrations. Edenbridge Bonfire Society in Kent will burn a giant image of the London mayor in the form of a ULEZ camera to raise money for local charities. The society burns the likeness of a prominent topical celebrity every year. Previous targets include Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Donald Trump. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now let's get back to Neil.
They do say time speeds up as you get older. Time feels, to me at least, like it's moving especially quickly now. By that, I mean events of world-changing significance are coming at us one after another with no breathing space in between. It's enough to make a person's head spin. I don't know about you, but I struggle just to keep up with what I'm being told, which official version of events I'm supposed to accept. In the December 2022 issue of Time magazine, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky was named Person of the Year. The message was clear and unequivocal. He was officially to be loved in those days and without question. His cause was presented as all but holy. The order from on high was that Zelensky was the embodiment of all that was good, brave and honourable. He was, we were told, from every screen and stage, fearlessly and almost single-handedly defending democracy. World leaders and A-list celebrities queued for the chance to be seen in his presence. Fast forward to an article in last month's issue of the same magazine, and Zelensky is described as delusional on account of his continuing belief that he will achieve ultimate victory over Russia. Quote, he deludes himself, a Zelensky aide apparently told a Time journalist. We're out of options, we're not winning, but try telling him that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the last time I looked, we were being assured every minute of every day by every organ of the mainstream media that victory over Russia was all but inevitable, just as Zelensky has continued to say. Furthermore, the official message was that Russia had really always been our enemy. A real-life Nazi was treated to a standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament in front of a grinning and clapping Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in recognition of the fact he had fought against the Russians in World War II. It was a rewriting of history, inviting an assumption that, in truth, we had always been at war with Russia, whether we knew it or not. The inference to be drawn was that Ukraine's war with Russia was a continuation of a greater, older war against that nation, and that final victory was Ukraine's destiny and our only hope of salvation in the face of an always evil empire. Do you see what's happening here? Do you see how breathtakingly fast the propaganda machine moves, discarding as though it had never been that which no longer matters, whomever no longer matters, that which is no longer convenient or useful? I suspect in the great game that the Ukraine president's card is well and truly marked. Zelensky, your bus is leaving. Destination Dumpsville, population you. When war broke out in Ukraine, some of us thought it seemed a bit convenient that just as the pandemic ran out of steam, that there was something else to distract and frighten everyone out of asking any more questions about the damage done by the official response to COVID. But it seemed that anyone with questions to ask about the history of the region was to be shut down. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on, wrote the Persian poet Omar Khayyam about the remorseless and irresistible nature of fate. Nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. In the world of geopolitics and international intrigue, the propaganda machine is the tireless servant of the rich and powerful in pursuit of their aims. Its appetites are of necessity insatiable, all-consuming, and it's utterly without pity, far less a conscience. The roving beam of the distracting light projected by that propaganda machine is as relentless as fate itself. Furthermore, it has no memory, none at all. Whatever the propaganda machine said happened yesterday, who was to bless and who was to blame, those are gone now, vanished without a trace. Memory hold. Volodymyr Zelensky has evidently served his purpose. Ukraine has served its purpose. The 500,000 Ukrainian dead, and who knows how many dead Russians, have served their purpose too. The moving finger has written and moved on. Can you see it yet? Can you see that we're being played, and like a Stradivarius? Somewhere the so-called COVID inquiry is going through its motions, soaking up an ocean of whitewash that will surely leave all the key players as pure as the driven snow and as blameless. Meanwhile, despite the fact unknown numbers died, suffered or were destroyed one way or another, no one is being invited properly to notice, far less to care about the ruination wrought upon this population and upon populations around the world. This week, Dr. John Campbell posted a profoundly moving video about deaths in care homes. He reported testimony of broken-hearted people who had watched helplessly as their elderly relatives died for want of oxygen or food and water, or were helped on their way with cocktails of drugs. The dying in the care homes was a huge part of the overall death toll. A person might wonder whose interests that bigger number served. Questions were asked while it was happening and were ignored. You might say the truth was shut away from prying eyes, denied the oxygen of publicity, starved to death. 3 years later, and it seems the truth is still being shamefully neglected. Instead, and in the most superficial and meaningless manner imaginable, we're being invited only to gawp at the naughty words Boris Johnson's former chief advisor Dominic Cummings used about former Health Secretary Matt Hancock and others of his erstwhile colleagues. And all the while that unedifying pantomime runs its course, he said, she said. One by one, the great and the good, the relic media silverbacks, the subservient dependent A-listers that spent all their energies dutifully cheering on the lockdowns, driving the fear, mindlessly pushing the experimental gene therapies that were marketed as vaccines, are turning their coats and spouting new scripts as they pretend to clutch at their pearls in outrage at the revelations in inverted commas, of unforgivable, unmeasured harms done in those far-off days of the pandemic. Too late, I say, years too late, so late that nothing being revealed in inverted commas, by the so-called inquiry matters a damn now. Someone somewhere has evidently calculated that in the foreshortened timescale of carefully choreographed and curated drama, a couple of years is long enough to ensure that whatever conclusions in inverted commas, are drawn by said COVID inquiry, none of it will lead to consequences for the guilty parties. And do you think any of the billions, the hundreds of billions, will be wrenched from the hands of the politicians' chums, the chums whose bank accounts grew ever more bloated with the proceeds of bogus PPE and ineffectual testing kits? Do you think any of that will ever be seen again? No, me neither. And in the meantime, every last recently minted Sir, Lord and Dame, every professor and special advisor, every obedient media editor who helped spread the debilitating nonsense will walk away without a care in the world. In any case, who cares about the pandemic now? Who cares about defending democracy in Ukraine? Those battles already seem as distant, as lost in the mist of history as any Carthage or Thermopylae. COVID and lockdown, like Zelensky and 500,000 dead Ukrainians, have long since served their purpose. Populations conditioned to live always with chaos and uncertainty. The moving finger has moved on and is writing instead about Israel and Gaza, about imminent enveloping war in the Middle East. And all the time, the unspeakable, unbearable suffering of civilians pawns on the board. Forget the pandemic, forget Ukraine. Turn all your trusting attention now to what the same voices say is happening in the Holy Land. This is the only thing that matters, the only show in town. And so I ask again, do you see it yet? The same powers that be and the same media that lied and spread misinformation and propaganda about COVID and about lockdowns and face masks and the war in Ukraine are now shouting from the rooftops the desperate odds around the clock about what we must accept and trust about the next thing. Across the pond, Americans were told Donald Trump had colluded with Russians to gain power. Exhaustive inquiries proved he had not. The contents of a laptop belonging to Hunter Biden were deliberately suppressed by compliant social media moguls, lest the revelations harm the election hopes of the big guy, Joe Biden. They lied about those old things, about the stuff of yesterday's news. We know that now. By now we know the lockdown policy was suicidal, as many warned at the time, gaining only ridicule in reply. We know the slogan about the injectables being 100% safe and effective was always misinformation, at best. And yet, to ask questions at the time was to invite more ridicule and censorship. And so why in a million years would any of us trust that they're telling the truth now about anything that's happening now? But as well as growing wise to their tricks about the past and the present, more important than any of that is the necessity to be looking out at all times, the better to spot what those rich and powerful and their obedient media pull next. Having learned that they lied about the past and the present, further progress along the road to recovery demands keeping one step ahead, looking out for what the next thing is. And you can bet your last cent at any moment now that next thing will come along. While war engulfs the Middle East and surely spreads, all manner of legislation slips through Parliament. King Charles prorogued Parliament. Did you notice such a move by the government might be interpreted in more than one way, but I would suggest it's like kicking over the snakes and ladders board when your piece is in a place not to your liking and you'd rather not play anymore. Now bills on the long march to royal assent go back to the beginning and must start again. Questions being asked of officials and ministers about topics they don't care to contemplate are thrown in the bin and must be resubmitted. While black smoke rises over the Middle East, barely noticed and largely unremarked, the online safety bill scuttled through, the energy bill scuttled through, and the amendments to the WHO pandemic treaty, amendments that will castrate our parliament and make impotent our national sovereignty, nudge ever closer to the line in December. All of that happened while too many were distracted by pandemic lies, by a war in Ukraine that enriched the few at the expense of the lives of the millions. And as for what's being prepared for our detriment while the Middle East is on fire, well, your guess is as good as mine. Here's the thing, the past is past and the present is gone before you know it. What matters is to look ahead to the future. Energy crisis and blackouts this winter, anyone? Maybe food shortages or a financial crash. But hey, why trust me? I'm just a conspiracy theorist. Laura Dodsworth, author and commentator, friend of the show. Do you trust, are you still able to trust the latest version of events coming from people that surely most of us learned to distrust?
Well, I've certainly learned to be a lot more sceptical over the last few years. I think it's really interesting you just finished your monologue with saying you're a conspiracy theorist, because something I've put forward, probably a bit controversially in my new book, Free Your Mind, is that people should let go of the fear of the term conspiracy theorist. So you have, well done. And I think that the reason people should let go of the fear about it is it's a neologism. It is designed to shut down questions and debate. You know, nobody wants to be an idiot conspiracy theorist. So it's used to kind of shut things down. In a way, it would be silly to think that powerful people don't conspire in their own interests. Of course they do. And yeah, there are plenty of conspiracy theories which have turned out to be true. Just 2 years ago, the idea of COVID-19 escaping from the Wuhan lab was absolutely fact-checked around the world as a conspiracy theory. MKUltra was thought to be a conspiracy theory. You know, the CIA ran quite astonishingly awful mind and behaviour modification programmes on people. You know, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, was probably experimented on as part of MKUltra.
But what about something as simple as safe and effective? You know, the online safety bill is supposed to stop misinformation. Now, if there's anything still out there that's misinformation, it's the still promulgated nonsense that those injectables were 100% safe and effective.
Well, in a sense, that was misinformation, but that doesn't fall under what I'm saying about conspiracy theory. Now, you've got to let me balance myself, because I've given you an argument in favour of saying that you should be able to call yourself a conspiracy theorist without people shooting you down. On the other side, because this is the point I was leading into. You know, as G.K. Chesterton said, you do not want to be so open-minded, your brains fall out. I think the danger for me in your monologue of linking together all these different crises, these perma-crises, is that some people are developing a feeling that they're all linked, planned, and there's an operation. Now, I don't think that they're all linked, and I think that the reason that people think they do is that we've been red-pilled so hard. So if you go back to lockdown, false claims were made, promises were broken, threats were exaggerated. There was this blitzkrieg of advertising, nudging, behavioural psychology and propaganda. Now, if you bought it, you really bought it. But if you didn't buy it, you were made super suspicious. Then, as you said, we went into the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, I don't think that was kind of planned as by any sort of cabal as the next current thing, but it also had a lot of propaganda. You know, there were bot campaigns on social media. There are already some academic studies about that. The BBC defended the invention of the Ghost of Kiev as justifiable propaganda. So we keep being hit with propaganda, and I think it's red-pilled people and made people really suspicious. I don't think they're all linked, though.
I'll leave that there because now I have to go into a break. While Laura and I conspire. After the break, I'll be talking to the host of Real London, Brian Rose, who'll be telling us all about his new film, We Will Not Be Silenced, as well as discussing the implications of his channel being removed from YouTube. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7th, lots of pictures.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. My first guest tonight, Mr. Brian Rose, is here to talk to us about his channel, London Real. But before we get into that, let's take a look at a clip from Brian's new film, We Will Not Be Silenced.
limits dictate what is allowed to be said. But today we will not be silenced, and 1 million people will be watching. I prepared my whole life for a moment like this, but nothing would prepare for what happened next.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is David Icke.
What happened after that broadcast, Brian?
That's very intriguing, to put it mildly. Brian, thank you for joining me. What did happen next, as you teased in that clip?
Yeah, well, just to put it in a little context, 12 years ago, I quit my job as a city banker and decided to start broadcasting, or I became a YouTuber, basically. And so that was 3 years ago. So I was 9 years in. It was April 6, 2020. I had the second largest YouTube live stream in the world that day, 65,000 concurrent viewers. The winner that day was President Trump's coronavirus briefing. And this episode would have been gone on to be watched probably 30, 40 million times, probably the most watched video podcast in history. And 30 minutes later, YouTube deleted and banned that video. Now, I've been doing this for 9 years. I never had one single video banned from YouTube. And I started on this massive fight for freedom of speech, or what I call digital freedom of speech. And I was subsequently banned and shadow banned by pretty much every other technology platform. That day was us fighting back by creating our own platform and live streaming to 1 million people.
What did they take exception to? I mean, were YouTube explicit with you about in what way you had transgressed?
Well, we were part of their partner program, so I had spent time at YouTube Studios, and when I got someone on the phone, they said that anything that violates or disagrees with the WHO policy, which was actually constantly changing at the time, was going to be taken down. And don't even get started using the V word, because if you say vaccine, pretty much forget about it. Now, at the time, they first said that you shouldn't wear masks, and they said you shouldn't wear masks. I remember the governor of New York said something in opposition. I said, so are you going to ban him? It was much in flux, and this is the problem with these policies. They're so subjective that they can use any reason under the sun to basically ban your content.
Did you see your cancellation coming? It was in the wind.
You know, I had Icke on about 3 weeks earlier, and that episode had gone pretty much global and viral. I didn't know that the BBC was watching that day, and they were really trying to put pressure on YouTube. And so after that broadcast, it turned out that there were quite a few forces that were trying to silence us. I didn't see it coming. You know, you always think it's the weirdos that get censored until it happens to you. And so then I really got this whole education. And right now I'm being censored today.
Was there any point when you were talking to David Icke, when he said something and you thought, now we've got a party. Now we've got something.
It was so early on, and first of all, we were all living with fear. There was so much uncertainty. My first broadcast was March 18th. They locked us down in London about March 20th. That broadcast was April 6th that they banned. So we still just didn't know what was going on. And again, I just want to make it clear, I don't believe or agree with everything that David Icke has to say. He has some crazy ideas, but I believe he has the right to say it so we can have an open and honest discussion. I never dreamed YouTube would take down one of my videos. It was created to give people voices all around the world, and that's what they did for me. But I felt really betrayed by this happening, and 2 months ago today, I had been completely deplatformed from YouTube. So, you know, life imitates art, now imitating life again, and that's been very challenging.
Laura Dodsworth, how do you respond? How do you react listening to it's not a unique story. We've been aware of people being cancelled, deplatformed, and all the rest of it by YouTube and other platforms. But how do you respond to?
I think you make a really good point about the WHO, because the WHO proved itself to be eminently fallible during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so social media platforms kind of chasing their tails to be observant about WHO current policy was obviously going to be fraught with problems, because things were going back and forth. Certainly wasn't just the weirdos. I think Talk TV was deplatformed briefly. But of course, as part of the Rupert Murdoch empire, there was pressure that could be applied to bring him back. I mean, I think Dr. Carl Heneghan, the director of the Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine and a doctor, and at Oxford, was also not deplatformed, but kind of visibility filtered on Facebook when he critiqued a randomised controlled trial about face masks. So it happened to all kinds of people, professionals, media organisations. I think the danger is that, one thing about this is that, under Article 10 of the human rights, we should have freedom of expression. So I think that if you are observant of the law in this country, if you're not inciting violence and hatred, I think you should be allowed to say things which are stupid and wrong. And that's not to say whatever happened in your video was stupid and wrong, but then people should be able to dispute it and put up counter material.
What do you do now, Brian? I mean, this film, We Will Not Be Silenced, what is your strategy as you look ahead?
Yeah, well, first of all crazy ideas that end up becoming amazing innovations in this world start out as sounding like stupid and crazy, from democracy to the steam engine to the internet to artificial intelligence. And so if we don't allow that discussion to happen in an open and honest way, we're literally depriving humanity. I mean, you could argue humanity only is where it is today because we've had this open and honest debate. I would argue that millions of lives were lost because we couldn't have a debate about lockdowns, about masks, about vaccine safety. And this is a real issue. And back to Article 10 or the First Amendment in the US or Article 11 of the European Human Rights, that freedom of expression, but more importantly, your right to hear me, to listen to me, was being violated. Now, thanks to Elon Musk, we found out later that our government was going behind our backs and telling these companies to actually break the law and censor us. So it's become a huge mess. And the fact that now, as of 2 months ago, I've been deplatformed again, it puts me in a tricky situation, but I focus on what I can control. Luckily, these days, there's lots of other social media platforms, including Twitter/X, including Rumble, and a variety of others that continue to put out content and won't be influenced by the government. Now, recently, we saw the government write a letter to Rumble trying to get them to silence someone like Russell Brand. And I don't know what he did, and I don't agree with everything that he did. But to do that without any type of, judge, jury, or anything else it's just ridiculous. And
that wasn't the government, though. I just got to say that was an MP writing, but it wasn't on behalf of the British government.
But it was nonetheless conviction based on allegation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a dangerous idea.
I just want to say it wasn't the British government, but...
So it's just a dangerous time, and right now we're just losing more and more of our human rights and more of our freedoms, and now people are self-censoring. So the movie goes in and shows how YouTubers like me, they self-censor. First, what they do is they demonetize you, all right? Most YouTubers rely on that for a living, so they will stop saying the bad things. Then they shadow ban you, taking your views down. Again, will get you back in line. And of course, then they give you strikes and they deplatform you. I never relied on YouTube for income, so I was free to say what I wanted to say. I believe in an open, honest debate. I don't agree with most of what my guests say, but I think we should have that conversation. And so this is important. We have to talk about it. We have to fight back. Again, YouTube is this tiny little area in Silicon Valley that's exporting their views to the world. It's a real danger right now.
Another break is upon us, after which we'll continue this conversation about online censorship and the rest, and we'll be joined by journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick to take the conversation further. So don't go away.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. My next guest joining the conversation about censorship has been very vocal about Brian Rose in particular, even to the extent of making a film about the time when Brian stood as a candidate for London Mayor. But does he think what happened to Brian was right? Michael Crick joins me now. Great to have you on the show. You've had Brian in your sights. Why was that? And how do you respond to what has happened to Brian's channel in recent times?
Well, I mean, overall, I'm very worried about censorship on the whole issue is so complicated, and, you know, values and standards vary in different parts of the world, and we live in a world of you know, a very limited number of very powerful platforms. Decisions probably being made by AI, by computer, not made by human beings, and all sorts of absurdities arrive. I mean, there's a great editorial in The Spectator today in which The Spectator complains about being, you know, they wanted to advertise on Facebook, and Facebook banned their ad because it had a cartoon on the front of Joe Biden, and, you know, it was a bit of satire. And, you know, there's a lot of absurdities, and there are a lot of very, very difficult issues. Now, the reason I was critical of and I'm still critical of what happened with Brian, is that he himself has censored. I mean, when he was running for mayor way back in 2021, you know, a group of school kids interviewed him online about his campaign, and they were starting to ask critical questions, which is pretty good for 15-year-olds, and their interview with Brian was brought down, went up on YouTube for about a minute, and then it was blocked on copyright grounds. And then there was an argument went on for a few days, and eventually they managed to get it back up there. But, you know, London Real they were arguing that the interview was Brian's copyright, or their copyright, and therefore they had the right to pull it down. Whereas anybody knows that a political interview, that the copyright on that belongs to the people doing the interview. And Brian was embarrassed by the questioning, and he's embarrassed by people asking about his business practices.
I have to let Brian respond to that right away.
Yeah, I don't remember us doing that whatsoever.
You don't remember the argument?
No, I remember the interview, but I don't remember any type of censorship allegation.
Look, this was a big story at the time. It was covered in all sorts of places. I don't believe it when you say you don't remember it.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about was our digital platforms allowing us the right to free speech. And when we give those rights up to people like YouTube, to potential in an online safety bill, that's
let's talk about this case here, right? Okay. You claimed that the interview, these young school kids, right? School kids.
I did over 50 interviews during the mayoral campaign, so I'd have to go back and check.
Well, look, this is bogus. I mean, there was a big fuss about this at the time. Okay. And, you know, when we get to our age, our memories aren't great. But in this case, I mean, OK, well, let me say, do you think it's wrong, then, that interview should have been taken off?
You know who censored me was the BBC not inviting me on their show.
Can you answer my question?
Debate against 6
You're avoiding the question here, Brian.
That's where the censorship.
You're avoiding the question here. Do you think it's right that London Real working, which is your company,
we don't have the power
exercise
to censor
copyright.
People. We don't have the power to censor people.
Well, you claimed the interview was your copyright, and it then came down.
We're not going to get to the bottom of this because there's clearly a disagreement.
And what I'm saying is that this is not really the first man to talk about censorship, because he has exercised censorship himself.
I would say that, you know, the error there seems to be YouTube, because if they received a copyright violation report and there was no copyright violated, they shouldn't have...
Well, who did they get the copyright violation from? Would you like to apologise then to Felix van der Geest? Would you like to take this opportunity to apologise to him for doing that?
Brian disputes...
Schoolboy.
Brian disputes that version of events, and we're not going to get to the bottom of it.
Well, he hasn't explained what the version of events is because he doesn't remember it.
We're not going to get to the bottom of it. This is a basic disagreement over a specific incident. But can I...
Well, I mean, he might like to take the opportunity and express sympathy with Felix van der Geest. He's still a schoolboy. He was only, you know, wasn't even in his GCSE year at the time.
To say that you're disputing that account of that sequence of events. And as I say, we're just not going to...
Well, yeah, but I mean, he could express sympathy, couldn't he? Because he had something taken down off YouTube as well. His interview with Brian Rose, which mysteriously was taken down. And, well, it's not mysterious. It was taken down on copyright grounds because London Real were claiming the copyright belonged to Brian.
This is the problem with YouTube. They can choose.
Well, express sympathy then with Felix van der Geest.
I clearly cannot tell them what to censor.
No, but why don't you express sympathy with Felix van der Geest?
There's something wrong with that.
You know, if I was in this situation and this had happened to me, I'd be hugely embarrassed and I'd be saying, Felix, give me his number. I'll ring him up. I will say sorry to Felix van der Geest. Mr. Rose is not doing that. Why?
We're just going to get stuck here. Let's just move this.
Well, we are, because he's refusing to apologise to Mr. van der Geest. But Felix van der Geest, a schoolboy.
But it's only your assertion that there's something to apologise for.
Sorry, and Mr. van der Geest, should we ring him up? Let's ring him up and put him on live.
Let's not. Let's
do that because let's do that. Ring him up right now, and he will give you his version of events.
Really, we can't do that, Michael. We cannot do that. Can I just address something?
What I'm saying is that censorship takes many forms, and when Brian Rose was running for Mayor of London, he didn't like it when people started asking difficult questions. And a politician whose worth his salt should be open to the toughest scrutiny and shouldn't be frightened of a bunch of schoolboys.
There's plenty of questions, including by you on my
You mustn't talk out the time that we have on this single issue. Now, you talk about being broadly wary of censorship.
Yeah.
OK? Now, on this channel, on GB News, in the company of Michelle Dewberry, you said that you thought GB News ought to be shut down. Now, that would appear...
Well, because you're biased, you're right-wing. I mean, you do things like you have... You're basically... I mean, I've been fighting bias in television for a very long time, and it's one of the reasons I left Channel 4 News, because I thought it was left-wing biased. And I think Ofcom, who are one of the weakest institutions on the planet, should get a grip on you lot. I mean, it's absurd that you have Tory MP after Tory MP after Tory MP, two leaders of the Brexit Party, and hardly any Labour MPs. You are a right-wing channel, and the rules in this country are very clear.
There is no doubting. There is no doubting. I don't think you can deny that the channel has made space for all kinds of voices, left, right,
they're predominantly on the right. I mean, look at when Nigel Farage takes the week off. Who replaces him?
Okay,
who replaces him? But the leader of the Brexit of Reform UK. Of the 67 million people in this country, you choose to replace Nigel Farage. It's his successor as Brexit Party leader.
We're going into.
You've got Boris Johnson. You've got Jacob Rees-Mogg. You've got Philip Davis. You've got.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. I will say right now, without any input from anywhere else, that I'm very disappointed about the sequence of events that just unfolded there. The last thing I want to see during a conversation between grown-ups about censorship is that conversation being brought abruptly to a close by others. I feel that that conversation should have gone on to its conclusion. But there we go, that's the situation in which I find myself, but I make no bones about it. I don't stand by censorship. OK, something completely different. Should tobacco-style warnings be put on meat? Surely meat is good for you, good for our country. Is this utter madness? We'll be chatting about this as we go in search of a guest. We have a study carried out by Durham University that found apparently that putting cigarette-style warnings on meat could act to deter consumption. Is this a right step or a step too far? Here to discuss this further is Channel Islands dairy farmer Jason Sallsbury. Hello, Jason.
Good evening, Neil. How are you?
I'm well, Jason, as well as can be expected. What livestock, first of all, do you raise?
So we have dairy cows and a few beef cows as well back in the UK, because I'm obviously in the Channel Islands at the moment.
What is the nature of the warnings that you are expecting to see appear on meat?
Well, if it actually came down to it, I mean, do we actually need warnings on meat? Because we, like you say, we do actually need them. We need to have a balanced diet, and we need to. We feel that people should have the choice. You know, we've just gone through a massive hurricane here in the last few days, and the guys have gone out there with the chainsaws, and it's their choice to should they actually chop trees down, and people should have their own choice of element of risk. You know, and where do we stop?
I read all the time about how meat is not only not bad for health, but that it's positively essential to development and to healthy living. Are these warnings misinformation, as you would broadly understand the term misinformation?
Yeah. I think everybody has got to make their own mind up, really. I mean, where's this actually going to stop? You know, are we going to put warnings all over the country and say, look, you shouldn't step off the pavement because a car could hit you, or you know, you should give these people an absolute, you know, put the advice in front of them or put the facts in front of them and say, look, now it's up to you now, really. This isn't a nanny state. You should sort this out, and you should be able to make your own mind up.
Also out there, lab-grown meat, plant-based meat, fake meat, whatever you want to call it. I would say that they're of questionable health value to anyone eating them. Should there be warnings on those products?
But they should be, you know, like I say, people should have take their own mind. If they want to eat plant-based products, if they want to eat lab-grown meat, let them, you know. But you know, give the people the information and say, look, would you prefer to have an animal walking around the countryside and eating the flora and fauna, or would you like to have some meat which is grown in a lab? I mean, it's, you know, give the people the choice.
Give the people the choice, a sentiment that I wholly concur with. Jason Sallsbury, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
You're welcome.
Laura, I need to come back to you about what happened during that conversation with Michael Crick and Brian Rose. What do you feel about that broad issue of censorship? I talk about censorship being censored.
Well, it's tricky. I mean, I guess the programme was coming into an ad break, so the conversation was going to come short, Paul was going to end shortly, but it did end abruptly, and that's a shame. I think that it would have been more fruitful to let it continue, but there were a couple of things about the conversation which were a bit problematic.
Develop that thought for me.
Michael Crick was being quite boorish. He was holding the floor. And, you know, it's not censorship, but it's a form of it if you don't let anyone else get a word in. So it wasn't really a two-way exchange. He was fixating on one issue. I would have liked to chip in and had more to say as well. It is such an important conversation. I mean, this is going to really define the next year of communication for us. The online safety bill is such a game changer. And to fixate on one video is to leave aside some of the really important issues that are coming up. You know, the big tech companies are now legally obliged to uphold their own terms and conditions, their terms and conditions, which we may totally disagree with and go against our Article 10 of the European Human Rights. I mean, there is so much to get into here. I think it's a shame the conversation was cut short. It would be a good thing to revisit, but, you know, it's very difficult to moderate a conversation like that when one person won't stop. I should stop, shouldn't I?
No, I think it's a very important topic to open up. That it's clearly becoming the case that fewer and fewer people make the material decisions about what we do and don't hear and the conversations that do or do not take place. And it's my feeling that in a world where there has to be a binary choice between less information, more government, or freedom to speak, then I know that I will always opt for a situation in which people are given the freedom to speak, even where people say things that some people find offensive, that some people find harmful.
Well, I think it's also counterproductive. You know, I haven't seen that film between Brian Rose and David Icke. I bet I wouldn't agree with a lot of it. But that doesn't mean I think it should be taken down. It also creates a kind of a Streisand effect, you know? People think it's been taken down because dark forces are at work and the content of the video must be real, and they're going to be more likely to try and go and find it. So I think that, you know, as they always say, it's a cliche, but sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think you counter bad information with good information. And the problem is who you set up as the fact checker and the priest of truth. There are lots of problems with this. You know, just the other week we had the BBC report that Israeli forces had bombed a hospital. They hadn't. Amazing how the BBC was so quick to believe the word of a terrorist organisation. Now, if that was an online platform, not the BBC, would they be losing their licence? Would they be fined? It's very difficult to get all of this right in a fast-paced world. I think there are a lot of very good intentions behind this online safety bill.
For instance,
protecting children from very harmful content, which could be about encouraging eating disorders or pornography. A lot more of the internet is going to be age-gated as a result of the online safety bill. That's going to have advantages and disadvantages. It's really hard to get this right. At the moment, the internet's a Wild West. I do fear it's going to become a totalitarian state.
When it comes to protecting children from that kind of content that you just described, broadly speaking, aren't the tools already there to do that without the necessity to have more legislation and more law? You know, isn't it already the case that that kind of content could be monitored and where necessary, blocked from children?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure about that. I have to admit that's not an angle of it I've looked into the most thoroughly, but there is some extremely disturbing content about self-harm and eating disorders that's targeted at young people on all the social media platforms. More needs to be done to enforce removing that kind of content.
Do you accept that that is the overarching intention behind the online safety bill?
No, I don't put forward that that's the main intention. Don't be silly. I mean, of course, I think the danger is that a lot of the counter-disinformation that is exercised already and through the online safety bill runs the risk of being counter-dissent, and that's what's dangerous. Brian did bring up the good example of the WHO being the arbiters of truth on YouTube and social media platforms, and they weren't really a fallible source of truth because everything was changing. So often it's about shutting down opposition to government policy, and the people that enforce these policies, you know, people at Ofcom or at big tech, none of them, you know, they're never neutral. Brian was saying he doesn't like GB News because it's too right-wing or Channel 4's too left-wing. Nobody is ideologically and politically neutral. Everybody's biased. So there's always a danger, you know, who fact-checks the fact-checkers?
Well, exactly, because loose and woolly concepts like stirring up hatred or, you know, who makes decisions about what is and is not offensive? You know, who makes decisions about what will stir up hatred?
Well, I think this is a real problem because under the online safety bill, big tech platforms will be responsible for policing content which they consider hate speech or malicious communications. Those are not easy things to define at the best of times, and I think it would be much better policed in this country by our own law enforcement and not by big tech companies that aren't based here.
Thank you for that contribution there. That's all from me tonight on Neil Oliver Live. Thanks to all my guests tonight. It was a strange experience for me, but there we go. My brilliant panellist, Laura Dodsworth, stayed with me to the end. Next up, it's Saturday 5.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Slight mixed picture for those of us stepping out for fireworks shows over the next couple of days, particularly tonight. There will be some heavy showers across parts of south east England, maybe with some rumbles of thunder. Outbreaks of rain also for northern central England into parts of Wales. Quite a lot of mist and murk developing also. Driest conditions generally for Northern Ireland and Scotland underneath some clearer skies. Some fog developing here as well, but underneath those clearest skies, temperatures dropping off down into the low single figures for some rural spots, just holding up a touch more underneath the cloud across England and Wales. That will take some time to clear its way off into Sunday, slowly drifting over towards the North Sea, and then into the afternoon we'll see showers pushing their way into coastal western districts of Wales, England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Generally, the further east you are, rule of thumb, more likely you are to stay drier into the day, but might still see few showers pushing into the Midlands down into southeast England as well. Temperatures ranging between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius. As we said, into the new working week, low pressure sits itself to the northeast of the UK, so we start feeding in this northwesterly feed of air quite persistently. So once again on Monday, showers will be most frequent across the west, could be heavy at times, maybe with some rumbles of thunder and hail also. Still quite breezy for many of us, but once again, eastern areas seeing largely dry conditions with prolonged amounts of sunshine. Temperatures generally around average for the time of year. Showery theme continues into Tuesday, but more persistent rain arrives to Wednesday. Enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.